make sure you guys go to the website and sign up for that Hui Deal Pipeline Club. And just a reminder that the Hui Deal Pipeline Club's also got that mastermind attached to it. So those of you investing $100,000 or more in a deal are getting free access to that. That number will likely be going up this year, but that's the number to get in as of now. Today I've got Matt Theriault on the line. How's it going, Matt?
Good, Lane. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Matt works for Epic Real Estate. He's got a podcast of his own, and I've been a longtime listener. I think we first met down in California, maybe about 2012, 2013. I came down when you guys were still doing turnkey rentals at that time.
Yeah.
That time you guys helped me get one of my first rentals there in Birmingham. So I really appreciate that, Matt. It was really good working with you and Mercedes.
Awesome.
Way back when.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of nice to have you on here. And first question we always like to ask our guests here are, what is your simple passive cash flow number you're making today passively? And tell us how you're doing that.
Got it. All right. So, wow, it's been a while since I've calculated. I think we're right around a monthly $30,000 mark. And it's a combination of single family homes and seller finance notes. So we're pretty much right down the middle as far as about 60-40, 60% property, 40% notes.
Yeah. So you guys have, we were talking about you're moving kind of away from the turnkey model for your clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, everybody knows that inventory is just very low these days. A lot of people, are flipping to more retail buyers instead of us cheapskate investors. And, maybe you can tell us a little bit from your angle. What are you saying?
Yeah. In the beginning, when we were building our own portfolio, and we just recognized an opportunity that there were busy professionals out there that would probably want to leverage our resources, our relationships, and help us or help them build their own real estate investing portfolio. So we started doing the turnkey thing in 2009-ish. And before I even knew it was called turnkey, we were just selling investment properties that were already fixed up with tenants in place and performing. And, every business needs a source of active income while they're building their passive income. And that's kind of what the turnkey model turned out to be for us. Totally unplanned and accidentally, but it turned out to be really good, and we did really well. It was easy for us to, at that moment, back then, gosh, I guess it's like 8-9 years ago now.
Yeah.
Time flies. It was really easy for us to provide a 12, 13, 14, 15% cash on cash return to our investors and still make a huge spread for us. So it was really easy sales. It was really easy business. But as the years have progressed, as you mentioned, the inventory has been falling a little bit, and that margin has dramatically been reduced in order for us to still provide a decent return. So, right now, I think our turnkey business is doing somewhere between 8 and 11% to our investors. And so it's a lot of work for, kind of, I wouldn't say little reward, but it's a lot of work for removing us from our main focus, which is still building our own real estate portfolio. So we're gradually kind of phasing that out. It's not, I think we'll probably always do it to some extent, but it's not a primary part of our business anymore.
Right. A lot more. I mean, I just see it every day. A lot more people are new to this real estate investing, and they said, well, I want to buy a turnkey house. And I'm like, dude, you're like 3-4 years late to the party.
Right. Right. Well, I don't think so. I think real estate is always a good buy as long as it cash flows. And I think it's always going to go up, at least as long as we're walking this planet, as long as we're alive. It's just the elements of supply and demand are already in place to support that. But what was that? I was going to make a really amazing point right there, but it seems to have slipped my mind. So maybe it'll come back to me. But I think buying cash flowing property, as long as it cash flows, I think is always a good purchase. I don't think you can go wrong there. And if you're just focused on just the cash flow, that's a big mistake a lot of investors make, because there's 3 other profit centers of real estate. You've got the amortization, you got the depreciation, and you got the appreciation. And then you've got the big giant wealth multiplier of leverage, which really isn't available to the average person in almost every other asset class. So it's still good.
Right, right. And I always tell investors that it's like, well, what else are you doing that's better?
Totally,
Go
yeah.
ahead,
Well,
go ahead
after
and do
everything I
that,
just
or let me
ran
know
down,
what
you
you're
don't
doing.
have that. Yeah, everything I just ran down, all those different profit centers, those aren't available in the stock market. That stuff's not available to the average person.
Yeah. So let me help us understand what you're doing with the lease options, or that your other business that's kind of picking up with the turnkeys kind of fading.
Sure. Yeah, with in our own portfolio, just like everybody else's, it's more and more for us to build those properties, or to access those properties, and, or what's the word, acquire those properties and build them up. So we kind of built our whole portfolio on lower grade properties, as C properties. We even had some D plus properties in there, and it's been a good vehicle for us to build. But now to sustain and maintain, we're basically eliminating those properties and upgrading our portfolio to nicer properties, even if the return is lower. And but one thing that we've been able to do with those lower grade properties, and really the only reason we're getting rid of them is just because they're a little bit more of a management headache than anything. So we've been able to turn those into seller finance deals, been able to turn those into notes, where we sell those properties now to resident owners. So we take tenants and we turn them into owners. And the pitch there is, hey, if you could own this property for less than what you're paying for rent every month, could you come up with a small down payment, has been our pitch to them. And so we've taken, like I said, 35-40% of our whole portfolio and turned those into now performing notes, where the cash flow is essentially the same because now we're not responsible for the taxes. We're not responsible for the insurance and the vacancy and the maintenance. That's all on the owner's plate. So even though we receive a little bit less on a monthly basis from the note than we did for the rent, it nets out to be more, and also with less headache. So that's been a big focus of ours, probably in the last 18 months.
All right. So you're taking the original stock that you had, the original turnkey rentals that you had,
Mm-hmm.
and then changing out the tenants, and acquiring new properties with the lease options in place too.
Yeah, so it kind of broadens our acquisition criteria, I guess, our minimum deal standards. It allows us to make deals out of more opportunities that come our way, and we're not always waiting for just the perfect property that fits our criteria to fit into our portfolio. We can do a lot more with a lot more of the opportunity that we're given.
All right. So I try to make this work. Whenever I had a turnover or lease renewal come up, I would try and get my property manager to say, hey, get in that conversation of, hey, you guys looking to buy this property? Do you guys like living here? At least
Mm-hmm.
open the dialogue to
Sure.
make it sound like we want them to live there, and kind of take ownership. But it never happened. I don't know. Maybe it's just the property managers never did their job, and maybe that's kind of one of my reasons why I'm moving out of my single family homes. But
Right.
what were
Well,
some
yeah. I
how
mean,
are some ways you're doing it?
if you sell the house, there's no need for the property manager. So that's
Right.
probably the wrong person to try and do that for you.
Well, I tried to sweeten the deal, and I said, well, if you sell it, or if you lease option it, I'll sell you, or we'll make out some kind of deal where you get like the 2% or 3% or whatever is
Mm-hmm.
the standard.
Mm-hmm. Another thing is just using the word lease option. I mean, that's everyday vocabulary to us investors, but to a resident owner, they're like, what's a lease option? Right. So you have to, I think it's all in the pitch and the delivery as well. If you could live here for less than what it costs you to rent, could you come up with a small down payment? All of a sudden, that's where the eyes and the ears perk up.
Right. So if
Mhm.
once you get someone who's interested, and 9 times out of 10 they'll have a credit score of like 100. Once
Mhm.
you get actually that small cut slice of people who are actually qualified and can actually follow through, how do
Mhm.
you structure a deal at that point? What are some of the standard terms that you use just to throw out there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we don't really put too much emphasis on the credit score if they can come with a down payment. If as long as they don't have an eviction, is that will exclude them, and as long as they don't have what's the other one, tax liens against them, or tax judgments, or I think the other one is child support, because those things will supersede a lien on a property.
Or
So as long as
bankruptcy in the past?
pardon me?
Bankruptcy.
Nope, don't mind the bankruptcy at all. Is if they can put in a 5 to 10% down payment, on a $50,000, $60,000 property that we're selling, that's a lot of money to them. They are invested, and we haven't had any defaults at all. But even if they do default, it's really easy. We just take the property back and sell it all over again. So we really don't lose anything. I mean, you start to get a really good idea as to why the banks loan money on property and don't buy the property. It's actually a pretty safe place to be, because traditionally anything that would typically go or would be considered wrong in real estate is actually a good thing for the bank. So that's the position that we're taking.
So then you kind of create a payment plan, just go grab a amortization calculator, and then what kind of interest rate and terms do you usually use?
Yeah, so we just use a traditional note. So it's a traditional mortgage or a trust deed, depending on the state, that's leveraged or that's leaned against the property, secured by the property. And the interest rate and everything we do, we have Dodd-Frank to work with. We have to abide by those rules when you're dealing with resident owners. But we really just reverse engineer the payment back into what we can sell it for and what the interest rate will be. So if it's say it's $800 to rent that property, we'll go ahead and we'll subtract taxes and insurance. So maybe that's $100. So now it's $700. So now we'll reverse engineer the whole sale to produce, like, say, a $650 monthly payment, right? So that comes out to weird numbers sometimes. Sometimes it's like, a 12% interest rate at 50 grand, or it's a 7% interest rate on 80 grand, right? So it's just the fact that they are paying less each month and actually owning the property is really what the big concern is for the resident owner, the customer at that point.
So to deal with Dodd-Frank, you get a lawyer involved, and it's
yeah, you just have to get what's an RMLO, Registered Mortgage Loan Originator, I think is what those initials stand for. So we just have one of those, and they'll process the paperwork for us, and we just created a relationship. It costs us $500 for each one of those transactions. So it's minimal expense, I think, to make sure that all the paperwork is right and we're in compliance.
And they pay that, is it like a third party servicer, sort of like a note servicer that the tenant pays them?
Yep. So then we go ahead and put a note servicing company in place, and they do all the collections for us. And I think we pay them just 1%. So a lot better than 10% that we would pay for property management.
Cool. Well, very smart, very smart. Yeah. When I imagine like 5 years ago, when I started buying turnkey rentals, it was like you could get an easy $400 of cash flow. But, nowadays it's lucky if you're getting 150, if that, if you're underwriting properties right.
200, 250 is a smoking deal these days. Yep.
Yeah. So it's awesome that you guys are finding different ways to flex the capital. I've heard of this before, and I like the strategy. If people want to do this, the lease options, your tenants, let them do that, but then, also transition to sell your properties too. Are you guys looking to sell some properties in the meantime if an opportunity comes up? And is that part of the exit strategy too?
Yeah, my intent with every property I buy is to hold it forever, because I really want, I'm more cash flow focused than I am equity focused, more than I am, giant windfalls of cash focused. I've just kind of done the math, and the amount of deals you'd have to sell to produce the same passive income that one property could produce is like usually tenfold. You got to flip 10 properties to find a bank or some investment that's going to pay you 4 or 5% to equal what the cash flow would be on that one property. So I'm very much, I'm not trying to sell anything. And even when we do these seller finance notes, we give them 30-year amortized loans because I don't want the cash flow to go away.
Got it. So maybe let us understand a little bit your background, how you started into this real estate investing, so that the new guy can kind of put himself in your shoes and what you were thinking. I call this the Han Solo moment, where Star Wars, Luke and Leia went off on their journey, and they met this Han Solo character and Chewbacca, and then their all lives took a pivot point and went off to do all kinds of things. What was your kind of your pivot point that you took?
That was in the first one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
they made like a dozen movies after that, right?
I know, but I haven't seen the dozen after that. But I was like, oh my God, he's going with our Star Wars reference. I haven't watched those movies. I'm going to be lost. But I did see the first one, so I remember that story. Yeah, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I spent the next 15 years or so of my life in the music business, and I did really well for myself. And life was really actually very easy, and I was very fortunate that I just had a talent and a skill that people were willing to pay for right off the bat. And so I didn't have goals. I didn't have to set to-do lists. I didn't need any ambition because I just loved what I was doing. So it was really a great place to be until the digital download came along, and it changed the way people consume music. And that just turned the whole industry upside down. And I would say within 6 months of the advent of Napster, we were out of business. I was bankrupt. I was divorced. And about 6 months after that, at 34 years old, I was bagging groceries. So I just went from a 7-figure year to $7 an hour. And after about 6 months of doing that, paper or plastic, I one unlikely sources of mentorship was the grocery store manager, who had been bagging groceries and pushing carts since he was in high school. He started working there when he was 16 years old. And at this time, we were both actually, coincidentally, the same age. He was 34 as well. And he was only 2 years away from hitting his 20 years, where he's going to go ahead and retire and pull I think it was 80% of his full salary from his pension if he did it at 20 years. And he showed me along the way how he'd been able to pick up a half a dozen apartment buildings or so, just small units, like 8 units here, 16 units there, 12 units there. And how that passive income from that small little portfolio he had built was actually bigger than his pension. And so at the age 36, he was retired. He never had to work again. And he was very excited about that, understandably. And he told me this one quote, this one statement. I don't know if it was his or where he read it somewhere, but I've said it probably 1,000 times since, where he said, you know, Matt, if you really want your money back, if you want that lifestyle back that you had in music, real estate is the final frontier where the average person has a legitimate shot at creating real wealth. And I was like, wow, the final frontier for the average person. And at that moment, I was feeling well below average. I was like, wow, if this is it, then that's what I got to go learn how to do, because I got to learn how to do something new. The market isn't paying anything for out-of-work music entrepreneurs. So that's what I did. That's how I ended up in real estate. He just told me, go do it, because I didn't have a plan B at that point. And after 6 months of bagging groceries, I was like, this can't be the best thing that I've got, right? And so I pursued it. And I'd say within 24 hours, long story short, I was in school to get my real estate license, because I thought that's where I was supposed to start. And after about 4 years of that, I was like, if real estate is the final frontier where the average person has the shot of creating wealth, I think I'm sitting on the wrong side of the desk. And, I'm a little bit of a slow learner sometimes, but that took about 4 years. And then I made the transition of, I'm never going to represent other people in the purchase or the sale of their properties again. I'm only going to act on my own behalf, being a buyer and a seller. Made a large investment in my own education. And fortunately, I found a really good education right up front, a good mentor. And yeah, here we are, 13 years later, 14 years later. And now we teach. So it's come full circle.
Did you originally pay for that mentorship, or how did you go about taking that next step?
It was actually, I think it was $22,000. And that was back in 2006-ish, 5-ish, when that type of money for education was really kind of unheard of. And I remember everyone thought I was absolutely insane, particularly my mother. And it was inside of this, and it was really a weird coincidence, but a weird situation where this really big, high-priced education was inside of this multi-level marketing company structure. And I'd never heard of I never knew what any of that was before I was introduced to it. But boy, it was an absolute blessing to land there, to have a great product that actually worked, and then be able to make money on the side representing that product while you put your education to work. And I don't know, I think 2 years they were out of business, but it was enough for me to get a hold on my own real estate investing business. And, that's been going up and improving every year since.
Yeah. I mean, I went through one of those programs, but it was kind of like, you see all the people who fail or never really do anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
there's a ton.
Yeah.
When we would go to our little education, it was in Glendale, Arizona, and we go there once a quarter. And so we'd go 4 times a year. And when you got there, I mean, there were 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 students all at one time for a whole week to learn about real estate. And, what you just said, it's really common. And it's sad too, because, in a classroom, there'll be 200, 300 students in a classroom, the same classroom, listening to the same instructor teach the exact same material, giving you all the same resources and opportunity. And still, I mean, with all of everything being equal, total level playing field, that, you know, such a small percentage would actually take that information to go out and do something. So
Right.
I don't think it's the education. I don't think it's always the mentor or the trainer or the whatever system it is. It's something that's within. And when you're ready, you're ready. And it's just like anything else. You can go to any other industry and there's always this top 20% that produce as much as the lower 80%. And that doesn't matter what industry that is. That's pretty consistent. I guess that's just human nature. But
Right. What was something looking back on, like, you know, the people who made it and people who didn't make it? What were the common traits of those who made it? And what were the flaws? What were the simple flaws that the people who just fell off?
you know, there was one instructor, he had this saying, and I've stolen this and I've used it over the years too. It was a saying, move at the speed of instruction. And I've heard it referenced in other ways from other people, move faster than your doubts, you know? And it was just once it would say, go out and do this. I remember my first deal. They said, go out and drive up and down the street and look for houses that look distressed and write the address down and bring them back here. And so I did that. I was like, okay, did that. And I wrote down the address and I said, here we go. It says, okay, now look up the owner. I said, okay, now look up the owner. He says, now call them and give them an offer. I was like, okay, let's call them, give them an offer. And I was like, but wait, I don't have the money to buy this property. It doesn't matter. Just call them and give them an offer. And I went through that process and I got the offer accepted. I said, okay, now smarty, what do I do now? I got the offer accepted. And he says, great. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go to the RIA clubs and you're going to share your opportunity and you're going to focus on what's in it for the investor partner. And you're going to network that way and you'll find the money partner. And I said, okay. So I went and did it. And I think I only went to 2 RIA meetings before I found that money partner. We closed that deal and I think my cut was like $26,000. And the whole lesson there was, find the deal first. If you find the deal, the money will find you. It's much easier to find that money partner or that lender or, you know, the joint venture. Maybe it's an equity partner, whatever it is, to put that together once you actually have the deal under contract. And I grasped that right away. And so then I just went out, started looking for deals and putting deals under contract. And I think that was the big distinction that I got. And maybe other people just didn't get it, or they were still afraid that they were going to get this thing under contract and they weren't going to be able to find the money. Then they were going to be stuck with the property and they thought they were going to go to some sort of real estate jail if they couldn't follow through on the contract. I don't know. But I just did what they told me to do as fast as they told me to do it. So I would think that was what made myself different than the rest of the group. And there were a handful of us. I actually married one of them, Mercedes, who you've met. And we were kind of in the same boat. It was like, okay, tell us what to do. And we went and did it, you know? And yeah, there's a handful of us. We still talk today. But I think that was the big difference is we just did it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So like, what is your, you became a successful student, started doing it, but then what was that next step to building your brand, Epic Real Estate, and become what you built today? What was that switch that kind of went on?
I think, well, once I did this and I escaped that proverbial rat race, right? And noticed that there were, I wanted to write a book. I've always wanted to write a book. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write this book and I called it Do Over, and it's available on Amazon. You can still get it today. But it was half autobiographical, half personal development, to where, okay, here was my first life in the music business. Here's all the mistakes I made here and how I crashed and burned. And this is how I recreated my life, started over with real estate. And that was just something next that I wanted to do. It sounded fun. And so I was listening to audiobooks and reading books and going to workshops and I found some podcasts about how to self-publish your own book. And one of the podcasts said, start a podcast to self-publish your own book. So I started a podcast based on the title of the book. And through that podcast, it got popular and it did pretty well. But I got a lot of questions because my reference points were always like, in the music business is what I did. And this is the lesson I learned. So when I started real estate, I applied that lesson over here and did this. The questions and inquiries that would come in were always real estate focused. And that podcast was kind of starting to turn into a real estate podcast on accident.
What was it originally called?
It's called Do Over. It's called Your Do Over. You can still find it. It's still live. I haven't recorded anything there for a couple of years, but yeah, that was 9 years ago. So that was a long time. That was before anyone really knew what a podcast was. And so I started a second podcast that was just going to be real estate because I still had these ambitions of being a best-selling multimillionaire author, which actually doesn't happen very often. So I didn't realize how the odds were so stacked against me in that industry. But the real estate podcast, it really took off. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, now we have something here. Maybe I should start teaching. Maybe I'm recognizing the demand. And that's kind of how Epic Real Estate started.
Oh, yeah. So that organic growth.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And yeah, so that podcast has been live we're on our 8th year with that one. And yeah, it's gone really well. It's been I had no idea what I was getting into or why I was starting. And it just turned into a great business generator. For students, of course, but lenders and partners and people bringing deals to us. And I think it's actually the teaching aspect of it has made me a much better real estate investor myself. Yeah, it's just been a blessing all the way around.
Oh, yeah. So what what's your 2-week experiment that you're tinkering on, a new project, maybe more of a long-term 6-month project that you guys are moving off towards?
Well, we are working on something. Have you been listening into our office meetings?
No.
Because I'm actually waiting to reveal it. We are going into a new asset class inside of our fund, and we are going to document the entire thing. And that will be released on Wednesdays, our Wednesday episode of our podcast that we have right now. And then once we have that one, will be a 5-day-a-week podcast. And that will probably be launched in probably beginning mid-May. And so we're going to document that whole thing, right, of how we get started in something we know nothing about, and take that all the way through the process. We're going to set the goal, we're going to track the goal, and we're going to report on that every single week. So that's the project we're working on right now.
You want to reveal what that asset class is?
No.
Okay. But it is kind of neat. I mean, like I kind of made the jump from single families to apartments, which is totally different people and different players and different rules.
Totally.
I mean, it's like the Tim Ferriss book. I mean, the reason why he's so cool is he dissects learning. He's able to figure out what's what and kind of readjust himself and recreate himself again and again and again.
Yeah. And congratulations to you, Lane, because I tried to make that leap from single families to multifamily, and it was not a good experience for me. And so we've ended up selling all of those multifamilies, and we'll start over again eventually as much smarter investors for that asset class. But I'm taking all of those lessons into a new asset class and saying, okay, that's where I messed up here. So let's not repeat that process here. Kind of like a do-over, kind of like what I did from the music into the real estate. So we're going to do the same thing and just document the whole thing.
Right. What are the first thing I can think of is, just kind of get in, learn some of the vocabulary, learn the lingo. Like multifamily would be like, cap rates and that kind of stuff. And then
I think one of the biggest things you can do, the most important things you can do, and I don't know what order these two come in, but I think they're essential, is one is find some sort of, be intentional about creating your environment and about who you associate with, and surround yourself with doers, other people that are doing what you want to do. I think peer pressure works in a way that, in high school, it had negative connotations because you ended up hanging around the bad kids and doing what the bad kids did. And peer pressure was like this kind of sign of weakness. But I think it can work the other way around and be a sign of strength if you hang around the good kids and what the good kids are doing, and you copy and do what they do. And so I think it's really important to be intentional about creating that environment is one. Second is find a mentor. Always be looking for a coach. And if you do that, you'll find yourself outgrow your coach. I've outgrown quite a few of them in my time. And you're just always looking, because there's always someone doing more than you, someone doing something bigger and better than you are. And I think it's such a results accelerator by just attaching yourself and becoming a person of value for the person that you want to extract value from. And, give first before you ever expect anything in return. And that's just been a really good strategy for me and many other endeavors in my life. And so that's what we're going to do with this as well.
Hey, too many people have this ego thing. It's like, well, I'm not going to pay another guy to teach me.
Oh man. I spend almost $100,000 a year now on masterminds.
Yeah.
And I've done that this is our biggest bill this year, but we started at a $15,000 mastermind just about 5 years ago. And I keep I need to find another mastermind. I need to find another one. I need to go over here. I need to go over there, because they are worth it. They are worth every single penny. I mean, you want to interview and make sure that you're getting involved with some good people that are actually doing what they say they're doing. But the amount of progress that can be made just by being around the right people. Like, for example, you asked me earlier, what's the difference between those that are doing in that class and those that failed and didn't, meet their own expectations? If you join groups of just those small percentage of doers, it's paid for itself.
Right.
I don't know, at least 10 times over. I haven't done the math, but I would put money on it. That's the 20, 30 times over what we've spent on our
Yeah. I mean,
mastermind.
from an outsider's perspective, it seems like a lot of money, but they just don't get it. Right. I mean, it's just.
Yeah. You know what really put a good perspective on money for me? It's funny. People have ambitions like, I want to make $5 million, $10 million a year or something like that. And then they face a $50,000 debt of some sort, or a $50,000 expense, and they freak out. It's like, you want to make $10 million a year, $50,000. This is a small game you're playing. This is like, all of a sudden you've got these big ambitions, and then you get totally shrunk by something that's a little bit much for you at this moment. And I think I see that all the time. I see it within myself all the time. Like, I'm up to play this big game, and I got $1 million. Oh my God, where am I going to get $1 million cash? And I was like, well, my goal is to make $10 million in the next 5 years. So that should be an easy thing to do, right? So the one perspective I got on money, just to talk about $100,000 in mastermind, and there's probably people going, wow, you're insane. And other people are like, oh, that's it. That sounds good. But I saw a comedy routine, a stand-up show with Chris Rock, and he was talking about the difference between wealth and riches. And he says, if Bill Gates woke up tomorrow morning and his bank account looked like Oprah Winfrey's, he'd probably jump off a bridge somewhere, right? And I was just like, that was such a great perspective that, what you have is a lot to someone else, and what you have is not very much to yourself, and you're always looking up at what someone else has. But just keep that in perspective. I mean, shoot, if you're in real estate and something like $100,000 a year for your education and creating your network and your resources and keeping all that in alignment, if that's a lot of money to you, then maybe real estate isn't the right thing for you.
Yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, and then keep working 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you say, like, people are, someone's probably listening, they're trying to get into that first rental property, trying to fight through, and they hear, hey, here's Matt, he's making 30 grand a month, and he's just screwing around trying to do new things because he can. He's for the fun of it. What would you tell him, to kind of take away from, you kind of recreating and just trying something different and trying to just learn and do something different, but what can they take away?
Well, I think when I was working in that grocery store, my whole mindset had shifted. My goal was, okay, I need to, and it was after reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, I was introduced to the concept of passive income and this escaping the rat race. And so I was like, this sounds good. I don't need to put all this pressure on myself to make millions and millions of dollars. Let me just go to work and get my passive income to exceed my monthly expenses. And so there's two ways you can do that. You can increase the passive income, or you can decrease your monthly expenses, or you can do both. And I chose to do both simultaneously. And in just under 4 years, I was able to get my passive income to exceed my monthly expenses. So I was, for all intents and purposes, I was retired. And I stopped. I was like, whew, I made it, right? And I did nothing for like 30 days. That was my goal. I want to get to do nothing as soon as possible. And I got there, and after 30 days, I had watched enough TV. I'd gone to enough movies. I'd gone to the beach enough, because although I was financially independent, I wasn't wealthy, right? My monthly passive income exceeded my expenses. So I didn't have to work. And that was a good feeling. But I just got the itch. I wanted to start doing more. And so I continued to do that. And I kind of remember that. And I think what really drives me now is just growth. As long as I'm further along right now than I was this time last year, it's a strong form or source of satisfaction for me. So that's what keeps me going. And that's why I keep on doing new things.
Something that you recently thought about burning your cash on for a time savings or an improvement in quality of life? What are some goodies that you're buying these days, or
something that I've thought of burning cash on to improve my quality of life?
or time savings?
Time savings. Okay. Well, that was something very recently, as I was kind of sharing with you, that we're going to be documenting this whole process in this new venture. And, I've got a podcast, I got a YouTube channel, I'm on Instagram, and I've produced all of that content myself for over the years. And so I do a lot of video editing, a lot of audio editing, and I do some Photoshop work for Instagram. And so what I've done recently is I just went out and hired somebody to do all of that for me. So I've hired a full-time person just to do that for me. And, hiring a full-time employee just for something like that, that's burning some cash, but it's an investment in the long run. It might not be an immediate ROI, but I think, 18 to 36 months from now, I think I'll look back and say that was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, especially when it's something that you can sort of do yourself and have been doing.
It's freed up a bunch of time. And here's a perfect example. I'm at my mom's house right now, and I'm in Oregon. I live in Los Angeles. My business is in Los Angeles. All my employees and office is in Los Angeles. And she had we had a family emergency. She had an incident, and it was life-threatening. And so I had to come up here and take care of her. So I've been here for about 2.5 weeks. I'll probably be here for another, 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm working 100% virtually right now. And all because, and it was nothing but a coincidence that I just hired this person to do all this work for me. So I don't need to be in my office. I don't need to be in my studio right now. So I can be 100% mobile. And so it's been a big life changer. Like, I'm away from the office for probably 6 weeks and the business is still running, and I can run everything from right here virtually. And it was really like the hiring of that one person. I'm looking back right now, and it happened just before my mom's incident. But if I didn't make that hire, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Did you, when was the point when you were making your podcast and kind of creating your business that you've brought your first person in? Is it kind of the same mindset that you had at that time? And what was kind of the first roles that you kind of outsourced?
The first role I think everyone should outsource, and we did not, but this would be my recommendation, is a bookkeeper. Keep good records right from the beginning. I mean, even if you just have 1, 2, 3 entries a month in the beginning, make sure that it's getting kept accurately. If you let that build up too much, you'll never get to it. And going back and trying to untangle all of that can be very expensive. And not to mention, produce a lot of inaccuracies in your books as well, because if you're trying to think of what you spent this $59.37 on 6 months ago, it's hard to recall all of that information. So bookkeeper was one. Second was a transaction coordinator to process all of our paperwork with all of our transactions, all of our real estate stuff. So those were 2 big time savers. What was the next person? Probably my marketing person, finding somebody to do all the stuff I don't like to do. And so that was the next person that so they did all my direct mail. They ran my online, my Facebook campaigns, my pay-per-click campaigns, and built the sales funnels. And that's both for real estate and the podcast stuff. We've got that person that does it for everything.
And, in this seller's market, somebody starting out, what is someone who doesn't have a substantial level of cash flow nor liquidity? What should they do at this point?
I think it's the same for every market. And I think when you hear buyer's market and seller's market, that's something that the media comes up with that probably sources that information from the National Association of Realtors. It's typically reflects on the retail portion of this business, which is probably 95% of all houses bought and sold. Those are the people that want to sell, and those are the people that work with realtors. Those are the people that try to get top dollar. Those are the people that, they don't have to sell. And so you're looking, as a real estate investor, I'm always looking for people that need to sell, because no one in their right mind is going to give their property away at a discount unless they have to. So I look for those 5% of those people that need to sell, that are in some sort of distress, where getting top dollar for their house at that moment in their life is not the most important thing going on in their world. And that could be personal distress. It could be financial distress. It could be the property itself is in some sort of distress. So we actually provide a really good service, and people will exchange equity for peace of mind. And the reason they are in need of peace of mind because they've got some sort of problem going on in their world. And if you look at yourself as a problem solver, and regardless if it's a buyer's market or seller's market, what everyone is saying, there's always people with problems, and those problems hit people every single day. And a lot of those people own properties. So if you just focus on that, you can go really far without all the conventional quote unquote needs that you would think you would need to get involved in real estate. Like, you don't need a credit score to get involved in that circle. You don't need loans, or you don't need all that stuff. You can get in there and be very creative, and you can solve a lot of problems without money at all. So I would say, with all that said, and I kind of set the stage for this, just focus on finding the deal and getting that deal under contract, and everything else, it takes care of itself. Finding the deal, getting under contract is the hardest part of the business. And if you get good at that, you actually bring the most value to the business. So you might think you're at a disadvantage because you don't have the financial resources to execute the transaction that you set out to do. But you actually are doing the hardest part, and you provided an amazing amount of value to somebody that does have the financial resources.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even in apartments, the deal is like a quarter of it. It's a quarter of the general partnership. So if it's 70-30 split, you just created yourself, 7.5% of the whole entire deal right there for not doing anything other than just finding the deal.
Yeah, well, it's not doing anything, because that's a lot of work to find the deal.
A lot of work, right? To get that deal, or just a lot of luck.
Totally. And the people with the money are willing to be a part of that and pay for that, because they can't do it themselves, or they don't have the time to do it themselves, or they don't want to do it themselves. So it's just regular business.
All right. Final question here. There's a Tony Robbins question where he identifies two large concepts that we're continually struggling to gain perfection at. The first is the art of fulfillment, and the second is science of achievement. So first, what's your secret to the art of fulfillment?
I think I just I touched on a little bit, saying that I'm fulfilled if I'm further along in life. If I feel I'm further along in life right now than I was this time last year, that's fulfilling to me. I had never anticipated what it would be like, and the emotions that would be evoked from teaching people how to be successful in this business. I tell people I escaped the rat race in 3.5, 4 years. I gets met with a lot of skepticism and cynicism, and I hear some smart ass comments here and there. Not so much anymore, but I used to a lot. And I was like, okay, well, you don't have to believe me. And secretly, I'm in my mind, I'm like, gosh, knowing what I know now, I could do it a lot faster, But I was like, well, I'm not just going to give all my stuff away to prove it to this jerk that I can do it faster. So being able to share that information with other people and watch them do it faster than I did, that's extremely fulfilling.
Yeah, let them go sign up for the other 99-cent course and download all that material and try and waste their time.
Right.
And second is the science of achievement. What is it that you're doing that's some kind of a hack that you do to been the secret to you getting things done?
I don't know if I have. I think I've gotten pretty good at creating systems and documenting those systems. We use a platform called Trello, and we take our whole process, we input it into Trello, and it's just like little check boxes. Like if we get a property under contract, we have a whole marketing checklist that has to be done for every property that we get under contract. And you can pass that checklist around to the different employees or the partners in that project. And that's been super effective. Like nothing ever falls through the cracks anymore. So that's probably being able to identify a system that's needed, document the system, put it into a platform where it can easily be managed, and then delegate that to somebody else to manage it has been life-changing. We've been doing that for the last 24 months or so. And shoot, that's why I'm up here able to take care of my mom, because all that stuff gets taken care of automatically.
Cool. Yeah, so I think that's it, Matt. I just want to thank you again. You guys were a big part of me kind of growing my real estate portfolio. You guys kind of came in at the the right time there when I was selling my Seattle properties and not finding any
Hmm.
cash flow at the time. And you guys hooked me up with turnkey in Birmingham, and then that it worked. Go
Hmm.
figure. And it's kind of been the one of
Go
the
figure.
points. Right.
Imagine that. We were representing
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
that worked.
yeah. Before I started my podcast a couple years ago, and so yeah, I mean, I am sure you kind of take the same pride. When people email me and say they did this and did that. I mean, it's pretty awesome. So I just kind of wanted to give that
Hmm.
to you. That I appreciate everything you guys are
Great.
doing, and yeah, we'll see
Great.
you at the top, right?
Pardon me?
We'll see you guys at the top. Later on.
Absolutely. You're on your way for sure. Congratulations to you and your success as well. And thanks for allowing me to be a part of it.
Yeah, you want to get your contact information and people get a hold of you, learn a little bit more about the lease options and what else you guys got going on.
Yeah, I mean, probably the best way is if you're listening to this show right now, then you know how to find the podcast. You can just go to Epic Real Estate Investing. That's our podcast. Or you can go to epicrealestateinvesting.com. That'll open up the iTunes app right there automatically. So that's probably the best way to get in touch with us.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it, Matt. Hope everything's going well out there. We'll,
Yeah, thanks, Lane. Appreciate it.
yeah.
Appreciate you as well.
All right. Take it easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.